6 German shepherds walked in a circle around the boy, but he hadn't said a word since the fire. Noah Blake was just 6 years old, and in the eyes of the small lake town he had become a living mystery. People whispered about him at the corner store, about how he'd lost his parents in the house fire that gutted the old blue cottage at the end of the Ridgeway Lane. He hadn't spoken since that night. Not a word to anyone. Not to his Aunt Marla or his Uncle Ben, not to the well-meaning social workers, not to the teachers who tried to coax a smile out of him in the grocery aisles. But he was never alone. Every day, like clockwork, the town would see Noah surrounded by 6 German shepherds, the only survivors from that terrible fire, the last living connection to the life he'd lost. His Aunt Marla watched him from the kitchen window, a mug of coffee trembling in her hands. "He's out there again," she said quietly to Ben, who was fixing a loose cabinet door. Ben didn't look up. He didn't have to, he knew. Ever since Noah had come to live with them, their house had taken on a new rhythm. Silent mornings, careful words, and the constant patter of 12 big paws tracking in mud from the backyard. The shepherds, Max, Shadow, Luna, Rex, Bella, and Duke, seemed to orbit Noah like planets, never straying more than a few steps away. Noah didn't speak, but he communicated in other ways. If he wanted breakfast, he'd place a cereal box on the table and wait for Marla to pour the milk. If he was tired, he'd curl up on the old brown couch and the dogs would pile around him like a living blanket. If he was scared, like during those sudden thunderstorms that rattled the windows, he'd hide beneath the dining table. And Max, the biggest shepherd, would lie across the entrance, head raised, as if guarding the boy from whatever monsters might come through the door. Therapists called it trauma bonding. "He's transferring his need for connection onto the dogs," one had said. But Marla knew it was more than that. There was something unspoken, something deep and ancient, between Noah and those shepherds. They didn't just follow him, they listened to him. When he pointed to the woods, they formed a protective wall at his sides. When he sat at the lake's edge, they circled him. One always sitting with its back to the water, eyes on the trees. The town grew used to this silent parade. In the mornings, Noah and his dogs would walk the winding trail by the lake, the dew still clinging to the grass. He'd throw sticks, sometimes absent-mindedly, sometimes with surprising force, and the dogs would race after them, returning one by one, dropping the sticks at his feet and waiting for the next toss. Fishermen nodded as they passed. Joggers slowed their pace, careful not to startle the boy or his pack. But there were moments, small, sharp moments, when the pain behind Noah's silence became visible. Like the time Marla found him kneeling by the ashes of his parents' old house, fingers pressed to the charred earth. The dogs sitting quietly in a half-circle behind him. Or the night when sirens from a distant fire truck echoed through town, and Noah disappeared for an hour, found later huddled in the garage. Shadow curled so tightly against him they looked like one shadowy shape. At home, the shepherds were part of everything. They slept beside Noah on his twin mattress, 2 on the floor, 1 at the foot of the bed, the others wherever they could squeeze in. If he moved, they moved. If he cried, silently, with tears running down his cheeks at night, Bella would lick his face until he wiped the tears away and reached for her thick fur. Marla and Ben tried to adjust. They baby-gated rooms and taped up loose wires. They bought bags of dog food in bulk and found a vet willing to make house calls for 6 big, nervous shepherds. But every so often, Marla wondered how long they could keep this up. The costs were mounting, and the strain of holding together a broken family weighed heavy on both of them. Still, there was something magical about the way the dogs watched over Noah. Once, when a neighbor's golden retriever barked too close, Luna and Duke stepped forward as one, flanking Noah and gently nudging him back with their noses. Another time, when a thunderstorm knocked out the power, Rex led the way through the dark hallway, pressing close to Noah's side until the lights flickered back on. Noah never spoke, but sometimes, in the quiet before dawn, Marla thought she heard him humming, softly, tunelessly, surrounded by the dogs, his small hands buried in Max's thick ruff. The town might have seen a silent boy and his unlikely pack, but in those early days after the fire, Noah and the 6 shepherds were simply learning to survive together. One day, one silent gesture, one gentle touch at a time. Life in Marla and Ben's house moved to a new rhythm, a rhythm set not by conversation or laughter, but by the unspoken connection between Noah and his 6 German shepherds. In this small lake town, the sun rose over quiet water, and each day began with a silent ritual. Before the alarm even sounded, Max would nudge Noah's hand with his wet nose. The boy's eyelids fluttered, and he'd sit up slowly, careful not to disturb the dogs curled protectively around him. Each shepherd took their turn greeting him. Bella nosed his cheek, Shadow pressed her forehead to his, Rex flopped across his legs, Luna licked his hand, and Duke, always the last, placed a heavy paw in Noah's lap, waiting for acknowledgement. It was the only way Noah seemed to start the day. Noah communicated only through gestures and eye contact with the dogs. Words had become strangers to him, distant and unnecessary. Instead, he spoke with his hands. A tap on his knee meant, "Let's go outside." A tilt of his head toward the kitchen signaled, "I'm hungry." If he pressed his palm to the floor, the dogs would instantly sit, eyes trained on him, waiting for further instruction. Marla tried everything to reach him. She'd sit beside him during breakfast, pouring cereal and milk, watching for some sign, a glance, a nod, anything. She spoke softly, narrating her actions. "Milk in your bowl, Noah. Here's your spoon. Do you want more?" Sometimes he looked up, but mostly his focus stayed with the dogs. If he wanted more, he simply slid his bowl forward and waited for Max to nudge Marla's arm. At first, it hurt her, this wall of silence. She missed the sound of a child's laughter in the house, missed her sister's easy way with words. But she watched how Noah flourished with the dogs. He would kneel in the backyard grass, tying knots in old rope toys, tossing them for the shepherds to catch. When he tripped and fell, it wasn't Marla who hurt his pain. It was Bella who rushed to his side, licking his scraped knee, staying there until he calmed down. Ben tried to approach things differently. He was a practical man, good with his hands, uncomfortable with emotion but patient. He built a wooden ramp for the dogs to get in and out of the back door and rigged up a large feeding trough in the mudroom. He never pressed Noah to speak. Instead, he simply existed nearby, fixing things, shoveling the driveway, sometimes tossing a ball for Rex or scratching Luna behind the ears. If Noah wanted to join, he could. If not, that was okay too. Every day after breakfast, Noah and the shepherds walked the perimeter of the property. It became their morning patrol. The dogs moved in a formation, perfectly attuned to each other's movements. Sometimes they stopped to sniff at the edge of the woods. Sometimes Noah crouched in the tall grass, and all 6 dogs would lie down with him, eyes alert to every bird call and rustle of wind. Therapists visited twice a week, sitting on the living room floor, trying to coax Noah out with games, picture cards, even a therapy dog of their own, a golden retriever named Penny, but the shepherds were fiercely loyal. Penny was tolerated but never welcomed. Noah would sit between Max and Shadow, eyes averted, hands clutching the thick fur on either side. When pressed to speak, he'd only bury his face deeper, the shepherds closing ranks, shielding him from the world. At school, things weren't any easier. Marla insisted on enrolling Noah in 1st grade, hoping routine and other children might help. The principal agreed, on the condition that the dogs couldn't follow. The first day, Noah walked in holding Marla's hand, his shoulders rigid. The shepherds pressed against the fence, whining softly, watching as the door closed behind him. He sat in class, silent, hands in his lap, staring at the clock, while his classmates' voices swirled around him. But the dogs waited. At 3 o'clock sharp, they'd be there, lined up outside the gate. The first time, the principal tried to shoo them away, but they didn't budge. Max barked once, low and commanding. When Noah came out, the shepherds surged forward, surrounding him, and he smiled. A quick, fleeting moment, gone as soon as it appeared. Despite his silence, Noah's world was alive with communication. The dogs seemed to know exactly what he needed, responding to gestures, even the subtlest ones. If he froze in fear at a sudden noise, Rex pressed close, steady, and warm. If he curled into a ball during lunch, Luna draped herself over his back, a living shield. When he pointed to the sky, the dogs looked up as if searching for the meaning behind the clouds. The neighbors were curious. Some worried about 6 large dogs and a silent boy, but those who saw them at the park quickly realized there was no danger. Noah walked with his hand buried in Max's thick fur, the shepherds moving in sync, a living net of safety around him. Once, when a group of kids came running up, loud and rough, the dogs fanned out, forming a gentle barrier, not aggressive, just firm. The kids stopped, confused, then started tossing sticks for the shepherds instead. Noah watched, silent, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Evenings were the hardest. That's when memories crept in, shadows stretching long across the living room walls. Noah would sit by the window, knees pulled to his chest, and the shepherds would gather around him, their breathing soft and steady, a living lullaby. Marla read stories aloud, hoping some part of the words would slip through. Sometimes, as the sun set, she thought she saw Noah's lips moving, silent echoes of the stories his mother once read. But night brought new rituals. Noah would lay out 6 beds, 1 for each shepherd, using old blankets and pillows. He'd stroke each dog in turn, pressing his forehead to theirs. Sometimes he hummed, a sound low and comforting, and the shepherds would relax, eyes closing, content. Marla and Ben watched all of this with a mix of awe and sadness. They loved Noah fiercely, but it was clear. His healing, for now, belonged to the dogs. As autumn leaves fell and the air grew colder, their little house at the edge of the lake became a haven, not of words, but of presence. In every gesture, every glance, every shared moment of stillness between a boy and his dogs, life slowly, quietly continued. Money had always been tight for Marla and Ben, but after Noah and the 6 shepherds arrived, it felt like every day brought a new bill or an unexpected expense. The dogs ate more than most families of 4. A trip to the vet was never just a routine check, it was an event. A parade of nervous, loyal German shepherds herded into the minivan, each with their own set of needs and quirks. When Marla and Ben sat down to do the math one rainy Saturday, the numbers didn't add up. No matter how they twisted or stretched their budget, it always came up short. Ben tried to hide his worry. He picked up extra hours at the hardware store, but there were only so many shifts available in a town this small. Marla started baking more, hoping to sell cookies at the farmer's market, but most of the money went right back into dog food and vet bills. At night, when the house was quiet except for the occasional snore or muffled bark from the mudroom, the 2 of them would sit at the kitchen table, eyes tired, voices hushed. "How much longer can we keep this up?" Marla whispered, glancing toward the living room where Noah was curled up with Max and Bella in a silent, motionless bundle. "We can't give them up, Ben. Not after everything that's happened." Ben reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I know, honey, but what if we just found good homes for a couple of the dogs? Somewhere nearby so Noah could still visit." But the words felt like betrayal. Both of them knew, deep down, that separating Noah from even one of the shepherds would break him in a way that no therapy could ever fix. Still, the reality pressed in. The fridge was nearly empty again. They had an overdue electricity bill and the van needed new brakes. And the dogs, well, Max was limping more lately, and Luna's allergies were acting up, and Duke was due for his shots. Marla started looking up local animal rescues and shelters late at night, her heart aching with every click. Then, one evening, something changed. Noah had started picking up on the tension in the house. He wasn't deaf to whispered arguments or blind to the new stacks of envelopes on the counter. The shepherds, too, sensed the change, growling softly when Marla and Ben's voices rose, pressing closer to Noah when his face turned anxious. That night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Noah lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He could hear the low hum of his aunt and uncle's voices in the kitchen, the stress in Marla's tone, the helplessness in Ben's. The 6 shepherds lay around him, forming a protective circle. Shadow licked his hand. Luna pressed her head into his shoulder. Noah closed his eyes, wishing he could say something, anything, to make things better. But words wouldn't come. Instead, he crept out of bed, careful not to wake the adults, and padded softly to the garage. The shepherds followed without question. Noah wrapped himself in an old blanket, nestled between Max and Duke, and closed his eyes. The dogs huddled close, keeping him warm against the chill of the cement floor. This was their safe place, away from tension, away from fear. Early the next morning, before sunrise, Marla found Noah asleep in the garage, the 6 dogs forming a living cocoon around him. Her heart clenched at the sight. She knelt beside him, tucking a stray lock of hair behind his ear, whispering, "I'm so sorry, Noah. I wish things were different." When Noah finally stirred, he blinked up at her, silent. But there was something new in his eyes. A sadness, a fear, but also a strange kind of resolve. Later that day, while Marla struggled with a stack of overdue bills and Ben tried to fix a leaking faucet, Noah disappeared into his room with a sheet of lined paper and a pencil. The shepherds crowded in, offering silent company. He wrote carefully, his tongue pressed between his lips in concentration. When he finished, he folded the note and tucked it under his pillow. The next day brought a fresh round of stress. Marla opened a letter from the vet's office, a reminder about Max's appointment, along with the estimated cost circled in red. She let out a heavy sigh and set the letter down, her head in her hands. She didn't notice Noah watching from the hallway, clutching the folded note in his small fist. That evening, Ben brought up the subject again. "Maybe it's time," he said softly, not looking Marla in the eyes. "We find new homes for a couple of them, maybe just for a while, until things get better." But before Marla could answer, Noah appeared in the doorway, his expression serious, his gaze steady. Without a word, he walked over to the table, slid the folded note across the scratched wood, and waited. Marla opened it with trembling hands. In careful, uneven handwriting, it read, "Please don't let them go. I'll take care of them, I promise. I just need them." Her breath caught. Ben's eyes filled with tears he refused to shed. The truth was undeniable. This wasn't just about money or space. The shepherds were Noah's lifeline. To separate them now would be unthinkable. Still, the financial strain didn't disappear. Ben called around, looking for odd jobs, painting fences, fixing roofs, anything that could bring in a little extra cash. Marla put up flyers for her baking at the grocery store, hoping for more orders. The neighbors, seeing the effort, began to quietly help, leaving bags of dog food on the porch, slipping envelopes with a few dollars into the mailbox. Even with the kindness of strangers, it never felt like enough. But, at least for now, Noah's silent plea had been heard. As the days grew shorter and the nights colder, Marla and Ben clung to the hope that somehow they could keep the family, every last one of them, together. And in the quiet moments when the house was still, they'd hear the soft sound of Noah's breath, mingled with the contented sighs of 6 faithful dogs, and remember why they were fighting so hard. It was one of those gray mornings when the lake was shrouded in mist and the trees looked like watercolor shadows against the sky. Marla woke with a headache, the kind that pressed in behind her eyes. She shuffled to the kitchen, wrapped her robe tighter, and stood at the window, waiting for the coffee to finish brewing, hoping the day might somehow be easier than the last. She didn't see Noah. Normally, by this time, she'd catch a glimpse of him and the shepherds patrolling the backyard, a silent parade of fur and little feet in pajamas. But this morning, the yard was empty. The beds in Noah's room were empty too, just the faint, warm imprint of 6 bodies, a tangle of blankets, and Noah's pillow, slightly damp from last night's tears. Ben came in rubbing his jaw, still in his work boots from a late call the night before. "Where's the boy?" he asked, reaching for the coffee pot. Marla shook her head. "I haven't seen him. The dogs are gone too." A knot formed in her chest, hard and cold. She walked through the house calling for Noah, her voice quiet but urgent. "Noah? Honey?" Nothing. Only silence, and a feeling like something had slipped through her fingers. She checked the garage, empty. Checked the mudroom, the basement, even the little crawl space where Noah sometimes hid when he didn't want to face the world. Nowhere. The house felt too still, too hollow. On the kitchen counter she spotted a piece of paper. She picked it up with shaking hands. One last walk before they go. It was Noah's handwriting. The letters wobbled on the page, but the message was clear. For a long moment, Marla just stood there, the words echoing in her mind. One last walk before they go. Had he heard Ben and her talking about finding new homes for the dogs? Had he thought, no, believed, that he might lose his last family? Guilt and panic warred in her chest. "Ben!" she called, her voice rising. "He's gone. He left a note. He's taken the dogs." Ben's face turned gray. "I'll get the truck. You start calling." Marla's hands shook as she dialed the sheriff's number, her voice trembling as she explained. A missing boy. 6 big dogs. The whole story came spilling out faster than she meant, every fear bubbling to the surface. The dispatcher promised to alert the patrols, but in a town this small, the only thing faster than the law was word of mouth. Within half an hour, Ben's truck was rumbling down Ridgeway Lane, Marla's phone buzzing with messages. Mrs. Downing at the bakery had seen Noah and the shepherds heading toward the lake. Tom, the mailman, had spotted them near the old park. A group of early joggers said the boy and his dogs were walking the lakeside trail, headed east, all in perfect formation. As the search spread, people stepped out of their homes, worried, curious, eager to help. It was hard not to notice a little boy surrounded by 6 massive German shepherds. Marla and Ben took turns circling the lake by car, eyes scanning the fog, calling Noah's name at every turn. Each time, only silence answered back. Noah, meanwhile, was already far down the trail. The shepherds flanked him, 2 in front, 2 on each side, their bodies close enough for him to reach out and touch at any moment. The mist muffled every sound except the dog's breathing and the crunch of gravel underfoot. Noah's heart pounded. He didn't know where he was going, only that he wanted to be with the dogs, away from the talk of separation, away from the pain that never seemed to let up. He stopped once, near an old park bench overlooking the water. The shepherds sat in a semicircle waiting. Noah watched the lake, thinking of his parents and the life that felt so far away. He pressed his face into Max's thick neck, letting the dog's warmth soak through his skin. He stayed like that for a long time, until a voice startled him, a fisherman calling out from his boat, waving. Noah froze, uncertain, but the man just smiled and tipped his hat before turning back to his fishing rod. Noah pressed on, following the path that wound through the trees and along the shore. It was a long walk for a little boy, but he didn't tire. The shepherds seemed to carry him with their energy, their silent loyalty. Each time he slowed, Shadow or Duke would nudge his elbow, Luna would wag her tail, and Bella would lean against his side. By mid-morning, he'd nearly circled the entire lake. He didn't realize how many people were searching, how Marla was crying in the cab of Ben's truck, how neighbors were walking the trails, calling his name, how every heart in the small town beat a little faster that morning. All Noah knew was that he needed this walk. It was his way of saying goodbye, of holding on to hope, or maybe just delaying the inevitable. Near the far end of the lake, Noah sat again, this time at a fallen log half buried in the grass. The dogs gathered close. He pulled out his notebook, scribbling something. Small lines, a sketch of himself with the 6 shepherds, the lake in the background, all of them together. He tore the page out and tucked it in his jacket pocket. Suddenly, Max's ears pricked up. All 6 dogs stiffened, sensing something. Noah's head snapped up. A shriek pierced the quiet. Sharp, desperate, not far away. Noah jumped to his feet. The dogs didn't wait for instruction. As one, they turned toward the sound, instincts taking over. Noah followed, heart thudding. The shepherds led him through the trees, paws pounding, bodies low and purposeful. In that moment, fear and loss faded. All that mattered was what was happening right now. Someone needed help, and Noah's pack was already on the move. The fog swirled around them as they ran. Noah's breath came in sharp bursts. He clung to Max's fur as the world narrowed to a single goal: reach the source of that cry, whatever it took. Noah's small legs churned over the damp grass, sneakers slipping in the dew, as the German shepherd surged ahead. 6 bodies unified by instinct, training, and something deeper that had always bound them to each other. The scream still echoed in Noah's ears, jagged and raw. He barely noticed the cold biting at his cheeks or the scratch of branches across his arms as they cut through a gap in the trees and onto the lakeside trail. A crowd was already forming, drawn by the frantic shouting near the old wooden pier. 2 parents ran along the shore, screaming for help. Their toddler, a pink-jacketed blur, was bobbing in the water, arms flailing, slipping further from the edge with each desperate splash. The lake, so peaceful a moment ago, had become a churning stage of panic. Noah hesitated for only a second. Max brushed past him, followed by Shadow and Luna, their bodies blurring as they raced straight for the water. Bella and Duke split off, moving to block the gathering crowd from the shoreline, barking sharply when someone tried to get too close. Rex stayed pressed to Noah's hip, keeping him anchored to the earth, ready to shield him from anything. Everything unfolded in a single, breathless moment. Max reached the water's edge first, launching himself in with barely a ripple, followed by Shadow and Luna. They swam with a kind of purpose that looked almost practiced, cutting through the cold water like living torpedoes. The toddler's head slipped under for a moment, then popped up again, mouth open in a silent wail, arms windmilling. On the shore, the parents were in chaos, one trying to wade in but slipping, the other clutching their chest in terror. Someone yelled, "Call 911!" Another person fumbled with their phone, hands shaking too badly to dial. Noah watched, heart hammering so hard he thought it might break. He couldn't move. His feet felt planted in concrete, but the shepherds didn't hesitate for a second. In the water, Max reached the toddler, gently placing his massive head beneath the child's torso, lifting her above the surface. Shadow pressed close, steadying the child's back, while Luna maneuvered herself under the flailing legs, pushing upward. The three dogs worked in unison, like a living raft. On the shore, Bella and Duke barked and nudged the panicking adults and curious onlookers, keeping everyone away from the bank to give their pack room. Someone started filming on their phone, hands trembling as they tried to capture what no one would believe later. The sight of three shepherds holding a small child above the water, calmly, as if this were a choreographed routine. The crowd's panic shifted to awe. The shouts faded into stunned silence as the trio of dogs, their muscles straining against the current, started guiding the child toward the shore. For a moment, time hung suspended. The lake, the crowd, the anxious cries, all a blur of distant noise behind the raw intensity of the rescue. Noah couldn't breathe until he saw Max's nose break the surface just feet from shore. The toddler's head and shoulders balanced on his neck. Shadow and Luna steadied the child from either side, and as the water grew shallow, the dogs slowed, letting the child's legs dangle free. The girl sputtered, coughed, then shrieked, alive, terrified but safe. Parents crashed through the shallows, sobbing with relief, arms outstretched. Max let the toddler slide gently from his back into her mother's grasp. Shadow shook herself off, sending droplets flying. Luna, tongue lolling, nosed the girl's shoulder, then trotted back to Noah as if to say, "It's done." The crowd erupted, first in shouts, then applause. Someone called out, "That's the boy with the dogs!" Cameras flashed. A woman wept openly, clutching her child to her chest. Bella and Duke, their job as crowd control finished, returned to Noah's side, pressing close. Rex kept a protective eye on Noah, whose face was pale but intent. Lips parted as if on the edge of saying something. Something huge. Something that might shatter the silence he'd held for so long. The sirens wailed in the distance now, emergency vehicles speeding down the main road toward the park. Marla and Ben's truck was the first to arrive. Marla, frantic, spotted Noah, broke from the growing circle and scooped him into her arms, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Oh, honey! Oh, my God, you're safe! You're safe!" She choked, clutching him so tight he squeaked. Ben staggered up behind, nearly falling to his knees in the mud, overwhelmed with relief. The shepherds surrounded them, forming a living wall between the family and the crowd. People began to step back, giving them space. An EMT checked the toddler, pronounced her stable, and wrapped her in a silver emergency blanket. The girl's mother, unable to stop sobbing, managed to choke out, "It was the dogs. They saved her. I don't know how, but if they hadn't been here." She looked at Noah, eyes wide with gratitude and wonder. Marla smoothed Noah's hair. He was trembling, not from cold, but from the flood of emotions, the intensity of the moment. The shepherds pressed close, each offering their own kind of comfort. A nudge, a lick, a soft, rumbling growl to ward off anyone who got too near. By now, half the town had gathered. Police took statements. Reporters snapped pictures and tried to ask questions, but Noah shrank away, hiding behind Ben and Max. The shepherds, ever vigilant, kept the press at bay. As the commotion settled, an older man stepped forward. Sheriff Dalton, who'd known Ben since they were both in Little League. He knelt so he was eye level with Noah, voice gentle. "You did good, son. You and your dogs. You saved a life today." Noah looked at the sheriff, then at the 6 shepherds, and for a heartbeat something flickered in his eyes, a light, a pride, a question he couldn't quite form into words. The sun was burning through the fog now, golden light sparkling on the water. The park, so recently a scene of chaos and panic, became a tableau of wonder and gratitude. Strangers hugged. Children pointed at the dogs, chattering excitedly. The mother of the rescued girl clung to her child, mouthing "thank you" again and again toward Noah and the pack. For a brief, shining moment, the world forgot about the weight of sorrow, the burden of silence, and the ache of loss. All that mattered was the miracle everyone had just witnessed. A boy, his dogs, and a rescue that would soon ripple far beyond this sleepy lakeside town. The chaos along the lakeshore faded into stunned quiet, as if the world itself was catching its breath. The paramedics wrapped the shivering toddler in blankets, her parents kneeling beside her, sobbing and kissing her wet cheeks. People in the crowd stood in clusters, some still holding their phones aloft, unable to stop recording even though the moment had passed. But the real center of attention was the strange, silent procession on the grass. A small boy, surrounded by 6 dripping wet German shepherds, each dog alert and perfectly in sync with their charge. Noah stood just beyond the main throng, his hand still buried in Max's damp fur. The dogs seemed to form a living shield, blocking out the noise, the questions, the flashes of cell phone cameras. Bella pressed her nose to Noah's knuckles. Rex and Duke flanked his sides, watching every movement of the crowd. Shadow and Luna circled back, keeping a wary eye on the anxious parents. Only Max stood entirely still, waiting for Noah's cue, the big shepherd's chest rising and falling with slow, patient breaths. The girl's mother called out, "Thank you, thank you." Her voice trembled with gratitude, but also with awe, like she wasn't quite sure what she'd witnessed. Several people nodded in agreement, murmuring about the boy and his miracle dogs. The paramedics asked the family to head toward the ambulance, but the mother paused. She turned to Noah and the shepherds, struggling to find the right words. Her daughter, bundled in towels, reached out a small, shaking hand toward the dogs. Shadow took a careful step forward, lowering her head, letting the girl stroke her soft ear. The girl giggled, a quiet, watery sound that made Marla's eyes sting all over again. Marla knelt beside Noah, pulling him into her arms. "You're safe, baby. I was so worried." She didn't let go, but the shepherds didn't budge, standing close enough to be part of the family huddle. Ben hovered behind them, his jaw tight with emotion he tried not to show. "You're a brave kid, Noah. Real brave." The sheriff cleared his throat, bringing some order to the scene. "Let's all give the family and these brave dogs a little space, folks." He shot a look at the reporters trying to push forward, and they reluctantly backed off, their voices dropping to hurried whispers about exclusive interviews and viral footage. As police started taking statements, a woman from the crowd approached Marla, Mrs. Downing, the baker, her hands dusted with flour. "If you need anything, food, a place to rest, just say the word." Others echoed her offer, and someone even handed Marla a bag of fresh muffins, still warm. Kindness in a town this size spread almost as fast as gossip. While the adults talked, Noah's attention never left the shepherds. He knelt on the grass and wrapped his arms around Max's neck. "Thank you," he mouthed, the words silent but filled with every emotion he couldn't say out loud. A moment later, Luna nudged Noah's shoulder, then trotted over to where the rescued girl now sat in her mother's lap. The shepherds approached slowly, calmly, as if they understood this child needed gentle reassurance. The girl giggled again as Bella licked her fingers and Duke rolled over on his back, tail thumping softly in the grass. Someone in the crowd called out, "I got it all on video." The words cut through the fog of relief, and for the first time, people realized this was more than a local miracle. It was about to be shared with the world. Within minutes, the video was posted online. Clips of the rescue began to ping around town, first through text messages, then on social media. People shared it to local news stations, tagging animal rescue groups and national outlets. 6 dogs saved toddler, boy's silent command, the captions read. As news of the rescue spread, people began arriving at the park, hoping to catch a glimpse of the hero boy and his dogs. Some brought treats, others brought cards and donations. The local K9 training center sent a bouquet of squeaky toys. The grocery store manager offered free food for the shepherds. Reporters began camping out near the Blake's house, eager for an interview. The phones rang off the hook, some calls from strangers offering money, others from people just wanting to say thank you, but the attention wasn't all good. A few people grumbled about 6 big dogs running loose. Someone suggested that animal control should investigate. Marla grew tense, worried about the sudden flood of outsiders and the scrutiny that came with it. But the overwhelming response was positive. The town rallied around Noah and his dogs, showering them with love and support. That night, as the adrenaline faded, the Blakes gathered in their living room. The shepherds sprawled on the rug in a contented pile. Marla held Noah close, Ben beside them, one big hand resting on Max's head. For the first time since the fire, the house felt safe, warm, a real home. The shepherds, exhausted but proud, kept watch over their boy, and Noah, surrounded by his pack, closed his eyes and drifted into the deepest sleep he'd had in months, the echo of the crowd's cheers and the gentle nuzzle of Max's nose lulling him into dreams where he was never alone, never afraid, and always loved. The next morning, the town was changed. Before Noah had even finished breakfast, the phone started ringing. At first, it was just neighbors, voices bubbling with excitement and pride. Saw the video. Can't believe it. That's your Noah, isn't it? By mid-morning, the calls were coming from numbers Marla didn't recognize. Reporters from local news, then regional TV, then an actual producer from New York. It was overwhelming, surreal. Even Ben, who'd lived in the town his whole life, had never seen anything like it. Noah, for his part, sat quietly at the table, spooning oatmeal into Max's waiting mouth. The dogs seemed unfazed by the growing attention, just happy to be home, to be together, to have Noah's hands resting in their fur. But outside, a crowd had already started to gather. People left cards, stuffed animals, boxes of dog biscuits, and donations in an old shoebox Marla put on the porch. Kids rode by on bikes, hoping to spot the famous dogs, and parents pointed out Noah through the window, whispering as if they might scare away the miracle if they spoke too loudly. By noon, news vans lined the street, satellites' dishes spinning toward the house. A reporter from Channel 5 knocked, eager for an exclusive. "America wants to meet the boy and his heroic dogs," she said, smiling into the camera. Marla hesitated, torn between protecting Noah and sharing the story that had given the whole town hope. In the end, she allowed the reporter to film from the sidewalk as long as Noah and the shepherds stayed on the front porch. When the reporter asked Noah if he wanted to say anything, he only looked at Max, then at his aunt. Lips pressed together, silent but determined. The shepherds formed their usual formation. One on either side, 2 at his back, 2 lying at his feet. Every movement in sync, every glance a message. The reporter commented on it, turning to the camera. It's almost as if these dogs understand every word, every feeling. The video of the rescue, now edited with dramatic music and bold headlines, exploded online. 6 dogs, 1 boy, and a miracle rescue, the captions read. Celebrities retweeted it. Animal rescue organizations tagged the video, urging viewers to donate or adopt. It didn't take long for the story to go national, then international. A family from Canada offered to cover the dog's expenses for a year. A retired K9 officer in Texas started a GoFundMe, and within hours, donations poured in, enough to cover vet bills, food, and more. Marla watched the numbers on the fundraiser climb, relief and gratitude mixing with disbelief, but the attention wasn't all easy to manage. Strangers knocked on the door, asking for selfies with the shepherds. Packages arrived from all over. Blankets, toys, treats, and handwritten letters from children who said the video had inspired them to be brave. News crews staked out the park, hoping to catch a glimpse of the boy and his pack. Local businesses offered free meals and gift cards, and the hardware store where Ben worked put up a sign. "Thank you, Noah and the Shepherds, for making us proud." The town rallied to help manage the media circus. Sheriff Dalton blocked the street to through traffic and stood outside the house, ensuring the family had privacy. The principal from Noah's school called to say she was proud and that Noah would be welcome back whenever he felt ready. Even the bakery delivered fresh bread and pastries every morning, free of charge. The outpouring of support was almost as overwhelming as the ordeal itself. But through all the chaos, one thing never changed: the bond between Noah and his dogs. No matter how many cameras appeared or how many times people asked about the miracle rescue, Noah's world remained centered on Max, Shadow, Luna, Rex, Bella, and Duke. If the crowd became too much, the Shepherds would surround him, leading him back inside. When Marla needed to run errands, the whole pack rode in the van, noses pressed to the windows, tails wagging. One afternoon, a representative from the local K9 training center knocked on the door, her arms full of leashes, collars, and a certificate. "We'd like to sponsor your dogs for life," she said, her eyes shining. "Free food, medical care, whatever you need." The gesture left Marla in tears, Ben speechless. As the news spread, K9 organizations from across the country joined in, offering scholarships for Noah, inviting him to visit training academies, and sending patches, vests, and even custom-engraved tags for the Shepherds. Animal rescue groups mailed letters thanking the family for showing the world the power of rescue animals. For the first time since the fire, Marla and Ben dared to hope they could keep their family together no matter what. In the evenings, the house was quieter. The Shepherds sprawled in a tangled heap on the living room rug, Noah wedged in the middle, his face finally peaceful. Marla and Ben watched from the couch holding hands, exhaustion mixing with relief. Outside, the porch light glowed over stacks of thank you notes and flowers left by strangers. Inside, the sound of 6 dogs snoring, punctuated by the occasional giggle from Noah, became a new kind of music, one they never wanted to end. The town hall was packed tighter than it had been for any 4th of July or mayor's speech. People spilled into the aisles, craning for a glimpse of the little boy who, along with his 6 German shepherds, had captured not just the heart of the town, but the attention of millions far beyond. Banners hung from the rafters. "Thank you, Noah and the Shepherds." Kids wore paw print stickers. Reporters huddled with microphones and camera crews, jostling for a view. For days, the excitement hadn't let up. Noah had become a local legend, though he'd barely left the house except for quiet walks with his pack. He preferred the company of his dogs to anyone else, letting them form a wall between him and the tidal wave of strangers who wanted to shake his hand or snap his picture. Marla was exhausted, but grateful, constantly fielding calls and visitors, trying to make sense of it all. Ben, more at home, fixing broken windows than facing a crowd, wore his only suit and fidgeted near the back, keeping a watchful eye on Noah and the Shepherds. When the mayor stepped onto the stage, the crowd went quiet. She adjusted her glasses, glanced down at her notes, and smiled. "Today, we gather to honor a family whose courage, love, and loyalty have inspired not just our community, but people everywhere. Noah, you and your dogs have shown us the best of what we can be: brave, kind, and unbreakable." There was applause and more than a few tears. The Shepherds, as if sensing the importance of the moment, sat in a perfect semicircle on stage, noses up, eyes alert. Noah stood at the center, hands clenched around Max's collar, face half hidden by Luna's shoulder. The mayor gestured for silence and continued, "Noah, is there anything you'd like to say?" The room held its breath. Reporters leaned forward. Marla's heart hammered in her chest. Ben squeezed her shoulder, whispering, "Whatever he does, it's enough." Even the dogs seemed to wait perfectly still. Noah stared down at the microphone, his knuckles white. All his life, words had been simple. Then the fire had stolen them, left him stranded behind walls no one could see. But today, with the whole town watching, the weight of everything, loss, hope, love, pushed him to try. He took a breath. His eyes darted to Max, who gazed back with unwavering loyalty, then to the other shepherds, each one holding his story, his pain, his hope. Something shifted. He took a step forward, hand trembling. Silence thickened. Then, softly, so soft it almost didn't seem real, Noah spoke. "Max, Shadow. Luna, Rex, Bella, Duke." He said each name slowly, his voice cracking but steady. The room went so quiet the hum of the air conditioner sounded deafening. As the last name left his lips, a collective gasp ran through the crowd. The shepherds perked up, ears forward. Max nudged Noah's arm, tail thumping once. Marla's hand flew to her mouth. Ben wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, turning away, pretending to cough. Noah swallowed, as if surprised by his own voice. The dogs leaned into him, tails wagging. It was more than a list. It was a roll call of love, of survival, of the family he'd managed to keep whole through everything. The mayor blinked back tears, then smiled. "Thank you, Noah. That was beautiful." The crowd burst into applause, clapping, cheering, some even standing. A few people whistled, others wept openly, holding hands or hugging their children. Even the hardened reporters wiped their eyes. Noah shrank back, but the shepherds rallied around him, nudging him gently, steadying him with their presence. For the first time since the fire, his voice had carried across a room full of strangers, and had been met not with fear or pity, but with gratitude and respect. After the ceremony, people lined up to shake Marla and Ben's hands, to pat Noah's shoulder, to sneak a pet or a scratch to the shepherds. Someone handed Noah a framed photo, a still from the video, all 6 dogs in the lake, the toddler balanced safely on Max's back. Another presented him with a giant stuffed German shepherd, almost as big as he was. The principal from his school gave him a stack of cards from his classmates, each one decorated with paw prints and kind words. But, most important, the town announced the formation of a new fund, the Blake Family Scholarship, in honor of Noah's parents, both former K-9 handlers. The fund would help other children and rescue animals in need, making sure that Noah and his dog's story continued to inspire kindness long after the news vans packed up and left. That evening, back at home, the air felt lighter. Marla cooked a big dinner, Noah's favorite mac and cheese with bits of hot dog mixed in, and Ben set out bowls for the shepherds. For the first time, laughter rang through the house. Noah said nothing else, but his eyes shone, and he didn't let go of Max's collar all night. Later, as the sun set over the lake, Noah sat in the backyard, legs crossed, surrounded by his dogs. The shepherds sprawled in a loose circle, dozing, content. Fireflies sparked over the grass, and for a little while there were no crowds, no cameras, no weight of loss. Just a boy, his family, and the peace that comes when you finally find your voice, even if it's only to say the names of those you love. The days that followed the town hall felt like a second sunrise for the Blake family. There were still reporters now and then, but the crowds had thinned. The lake town, once abuzz with a story too big to hold, began to settle back into its gentle rhythm. Kids racing bikes along the water, fishermen lining the docks, autumn leaves skittering down Ridgeway Lane. In the center of it all was Noah, never alone, always flanked by the 6 shepherds who had become legend. The scholarship fund, launched in memory of Noah's parents, made the local paper and quickly outgrew the town. Donations poured in from people all over, many with their own stories of rescue dogs, lost parents, or silent children who needed hope. Marla spent her evenings at the kitchen table, handwriting thank you cards with Noah at her side. His contribution a series of drawings, each one a tangle of boy and dogs and sunlight. The Shepherds, once seen as a burden, were now officially adopted by the Blake family. The paperwork arrived with a packet of certificates, new collars with gleaming tags, and a letter from the County Animal Services, congratulating the family on permanent guardianship of 6 very special K9s. Marla read the letter out loud, her voice catching as she looked at Noah, who grinned, really grinned, for the first time in months. Ben built a new fence around the backyard, tall and sturdy. He carved each dog's name into a wooden plank by the gate. Max, Shadow, Luna, Rex, Bella, Duke. Neighbors stopped by to see the project, dropping off homemade meals and bags of dog treats. The local vet, who'd watched the whole saga unfold, offered free checkups for the Shepherds for life. The K9 Academy sent training kits and invited Noah to visit whenever he liked. Noah began therapy again, but this time it was different. Instead of the sterile office with charts and softly spoken questions, his sessions happened outside, on the grass, surrounded by the Shepherds and a new cast of rescue dogs. Some nervous, some rowdy, all eager to play. The therapist, a gentle woman named Dr. Avery, knew better than to force words. She'd sit cross-legged, tossing tennis balls for Luna and Rex, chatting casually about the weather, or reading stories while Noah traced shapes in the dirt with a stick. Other kids, ones who had lost something or struggled with their own shadows, joined these outdoor sessions. For them, Noah was living proof that it was possible to be silent and still be seen, to carry wounds and still heal. He taught the others how to braid paracord leashes, how to read a dog's mood from the tilt of its ears or the set of its tail. The Shepherds became therapy dogs in their own right, never trained, but somehow knowing exactly who needed comfort, when to sit close, or when to nudge a nervous hand with a cold nose. School called, but Noah went on his own terms. At first, he attended only half-days, always with the Shepherds waiting outside the classroom windows, lined up like a living welcome home committee. The teachers learned to communicate with gestures and patience, and the other students, who'd seen the viral videos, were more curious than cruel. When bullies tried to whisper, "Dog boy," Max would fix them with a level stare through the glass, and the whispers faded into nothing. On weekends, the Blakes went for long hikes by the lake. Noah led the way, the Shepherds weaving in and out among the trees, leaping into the water, chasing sticks, coming back for head scratches and quiet moments with their boy. Marla watched these scenes with a full heart. She'd lost her sister, but gained a new kind of family. One built on resilience, second chances, and a love that needed no words. Ben, who'd always worried he wasn't enough for Noah, started taking him fishing, showing him how to bait a hook, how to cast a line, how to sit for hours with nothing but the sound of water and the warmth of a dog pressed against his knee. Sometimes at dusk, Ben would tell Noah stories about his mother and father, about bravery and mistakes and the value of always coming home. Noah listened in silence, but sometimes he'd rest his hand on Ben's, or let a small, rare laugh slip out, and Ben would know he was reaching through the shadows step by step. The town celebrated them, but more importantly, it embraced them. People waved from porches, left dog biscuits in the mailbox, invited the Blakes to block parties and backyard barbecues. The sense of being different faded, replaced by belonging. Even the lake, once a reminder of loss, became a place of memory and hope, a sanctuary where old pain slowly gave way to new dreams. As the weeks passed, something remarkable happened. Noah began to find his voice in other ways. He spoke in single words, at first only to the shepherds. Sit, come, stay, then to Marla and Ben, soft but certain. Thank you, he whispered once, as Marla tucked him in, Max's heavy head across his feet. Sometimes he'd tell the dogs a story at bedtime, murmuring names and adventures, his voice rising and falling like wind through the trees. He drew constantly, sketchbooks filled with scenes of his life, real and imagined. A boy and his pack, running across open fields. Dogs rescuing children from danger or napping together in the golden sunlight. In every drawing, the boy was never alone. In every drawing, the pack was whole. By Thanksgiving, Noah was talking again, halting, sometimes stopping in the middle of a sentence, but trying. When the family gathered around the table, plates piled high and the shepherds curled beneath their feet, Marla looked at Noah and smiled. "We're proud of you," she said, her eyes shining. Noah looked at his aunt, his uncle, his dogs. He didn't need to say anything more. Everything he'd lost had led to this. A new beginning, a family rebuilt, and a future filled with the kind of hope only love, steady, silent, loyal, could bring. The first real snow of winter drifted down in thick, lazy flakes, softening the world to quiet white. The lake was half frozen, the edges rimmed in silver ice, and smoke curled from chimneys all along Ridgeway Lane. Inside the Blake house, warmth radiated from every corner, through laughter, shared meals, and the comforting weight of 6 German shepherds stretched out across every rug and couch. Noah had grown taller, stronger, his eyes a little brighter each day. He still spoke softly, sometimes lapsing into silence, but the fear and sorrow that once gripped him had melted, replaced by trust and an unspoken happiness. The shepherds, Max, Shadow, Luna, Rex, Bella, and Duke, followed his every move, content just to be near, their loyalty unbreakable. On weekends, the family would gather by the lake. The snow was deep enough for sledding, and the shepherds would leap through drifts, tongues lolling, ears flying. Noah would shriek with laughter, pure, ringing, and free, while Marla snapped photos and Ben brewed hot cocoa over a portable stove. The whole scene felt like a gift, a miracle stitched together by hope, resilience, and the quiet magic of animals who simply loved. Noah's sketches now hung on the kitchen walls, a collage of dogs, lakes, sunrises, and small victories. One drawing showed his parents, smiling, arms around each other, standing in front of a line of shepherds, with Noah in the middle, grinning wide, a memory built from longing and love. Another showed the moment at the lake when 6 dogs formed a raft for a child in need. Family, he'd written in uneven letters at the bottom, underlined twice. Winter break brought the town's annual festival. This year, for the first time, the Blakes were at the center. The mayor announced a new award, the Blake Medal for Courage and Compassion, given each year to a citizen or animal who embodied the town's spirit of kindness. The first medals went to the shepherds, their names engraved on shiny gold discs, and to Noah, whose voice, when he accepted, trembled but didn't falter. "I was scared after the fire," he said, his eyes on the ground, the shepherds crowding his legs. "I didn't think I'd ever feel safe again, but my dogs, they never left. They showed me it's okay to be different. They helped me come back." The applause was thunderous, echoing through the snow-covered square. Cameras flashed, reporters jotted notes, and Marla wept into her scarf. Ben grinned and handed out cups of cocoa to anyone nearby. After the ceremony, as twilight fell, the family walked the long way home through the park. The shepherds pranced ahead, sniffing at the snow, darting back to nuzzle Noah's hand. Marla linked arms with Ben, her heart full. For a moment, everything that had come before, the fire, the fear, the pain, felt far away, distant memories softened by the warmth of new beginnings. At home, the fire crackled in the hearth. Noah curled up on the living room rug, all 6 dogs surrounding him, their bodies a living blanket. He tossed a rubber ball across the room. Luna pounced, Rex joined in, and Max rolled over, belly up, waiting for Noah to giggle and scratch his side. Outside, the wind howled against the window panes, but inside, peace reigned. The house was filled with stories. The tale of a boy who'd found his way back, of a family rebuilt from ashes, of a pack of dogs whose devotion saved more than just a life. On the mantel sat the scholarship fund's certificate, a framed photo of Noah's parents in their K-9 uniforms, and a stack of thank you cards from children and families who'd been touched by the story. Noah's therapist, Dr. Avery, visited sometimes, no longer to coax words, but to listen to Noah's laughter and marvel at the strength in his drawings, his voice, and his soul. Other children came too, drawn by the promise of healing and the presence of 6 gentle giants who greeted everyone like old friends. In the quietest moments, early morning, just before dawn, Noah would walk to the lake's edge, the shepherds padding beside him. He'd toss a stick into the water, watch it skip across the ice, then sit on the dock, legs swinging. Dogs pressed close on either side. He'd think of his parents, of everything lost and everything gained, and understand that sometimes healing wasn't about forgetting, but about carrying love forward, letting it change you, letting it grow. He'd whisper to Max, to Shadow, to all his dogs, sometimes with words, sometimes just a touch, and the shepherds, wise in a way no person could ever be, listened. They'd press their heads to his, sharing warmth and strength. Sometimes it's not a person who brings you back. Sometimes it's the ones who never left. That's what Noah learned, what the town learned, what everyone who watched their story unfold came to understand. Healing is possible, even after the deepest loss, when you're surrounded by love, loyalty, and hearts that refuse to let you go. So, as the snow kept falling and the world turned ever onward, the Blake family, boy, dogs, aunt, and uncle, built a new life from kindness, courage, and second chances. Their story spread, inspiring others to open their hearts to rescue animals, to never give up on the silent or the hurting, and to believe that even when words fail, love never does. If you've been moved by Noah and his shepherds, remember, you can change a life. Support your local rescue, share kindness, and let love speak without saying a word. Like, subscribe, and help us share more stories of hope, healing, and the extraordinary bonds that save us all.